founder of Not Boring and Not Boring Capital. The venture fund is over 50 million AUM now. Yep. The newsletter has over 250,000 subscribers now. Why Substack? You could have started, you made up your own website.
I took a writing course. I took David Perell's Rite of Passage. And one of the assignments was there's this new platform called Substack. Go set up Substack, get 20 subscribers and go. We had to pick a writer that we liked. And I picked Ben Thompson. And David called it out in the 50-person class or whatever as being the best thing written that week. And I was like, oh, maybe I can actually write. If my writing is good, the newsletter does well. When my writing is not as good, the newsletter does less well.
At the same time, your business model is, a venture fund. Since we're in analysis mode, how do you think Ramp outpaced Brex?
If they are saving companies 15% and saving them a bunch of time, what are you doing? Still using Amex. There are going to be a wave of companies built now that replace these at least 50-year-old kind of company, like the Boeings of the world. In Amex's case, 140 years old. You should try to actually go beat the incumbent. If your goal is to not go out and try to be the very best in the industry, what are you even doing?
Packy McCormick, founder of Not Boring and Not Boring Capital, which is a newsletter over 200. The newsletter has over 250,000 subscribers now. You started about 6 years ago?
Early pandemic. Kind of started 2019, called it per my last email, went full time on it during the pandemic, switched the name to Not Boring.
And your business model is, a venture fund.
The newsletter is a standalone business, but they work very well together. Yeah.
So, and the venture fund is over 50 million AUM now. Yep. Yeah. Okay. You were early on Substack as a platform, and I want to talk about Substack as a platform because it's evolved so much with the 2022 Twitter acquisition saga, and Chris Best recently told the story of how, Elon tried to acquire Substack, went sideways, and they launched a competitive feature, obviously in Notes. How did that, so this is, I think, 3 years into when you started the newsletter. So compare early days, how did Twitter help build up your Substack newsletter, and then why Substack? You could have started, you made up your own website, do anything, right?
So one could have made their own website,
or Medium, or Beehive. Well, no, they weren't around then. Maybe 2022, you could have moved to Beehive.
There are multiple kinds of writers on Substack, and just in media generally. There's people. He's not as much a writer, but Austin Reef is a friend, and I think just knows the media business inside and out, thinks about this stuff, thinks about growth and which platform to be on. Mm-hmm. Then there's people like me where I took a writing course. I took David Perell's Rite of Passage. And one of the assignments was there's this new platform called Substack. Go set up Substack, get 20 subscribers and go. Mm. And for the first couple of years, it was really just inertia. I was on Substack. It worked well enough. I didn't have very many subscribers. My business model has always been sponsor, not subscription. So don't pay them anything. I still have never paid Substack a dime. And so it works well enough for that. There were definitely times in the beginning where I overthought it, and I was like, man, if only I had the Ben Thompson style, footnotes where they're the dots where it popped up right in there, that would be amazing. And I almost went and did my own whole thing just to get those kind of features. And then you realize that is not the main game. If my writing is good, the newsletter does well. When my writing is not as good, the newsletter does less well. And so I focus on that more than anything. I think certainly in the early days, Twitter helped. A little bit through me sharing my own stuff, but often when someone else would read it and just kind of randomly say nice things about it, that certainly helped. I think there's been a general slowdown in growth. It's just, I spend time on the Substack Notes app whenever I delete X from my phone, which is often it's on there right now because I wanted to tweet something on the way up here, but normally not on my phone. I'll download it, tweet something, and then delete it again. So I spent time on the Substack Notes app, and it seems like a general sentiment is growth slows, or open rates are down because everything gets sent to spam. All these things kind of happen over time. Twitter certainly, I think, didn't help on the growth side, that feud, but I don't think it's a huge thing. The place that I'm at now, 250,000 people is way more than I would need to do what I want to do with the newsletter, which is tell great stories of these companies, and find an audience of people who really want to read these 10,000, the last one was 40,000 word kind of pieces on this stuff. And so like if I had 1,000 of like the greatest, the people that I want to read it, like I don't really actually care very much about growth beyond that.
At the end of the day, you're writing for those 1,000 loyal fans. That rule, I think that this gets discussed like in almost all of tech.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Yeah,
that's the goal for sure.
What did you learn from that course with David Perell? What's the course called? Rite of Passage?
Rite of Passage.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I thought the course was great. So I think like the first thing was just every week having to show up and have something to write, and we broke out into small groups and we would critique each other's stuff. And so you had to show up with something. And so just writing every week was one thing. We had to do an assignment. Maybe it was the first assignment we did. We had to pick a writer that we liked on the internet and, write about them. And I picked Ben Thompson, and David like called it out in the 50-person class or whatever as being like the best thing written that week. And I was like, oh, like maybe I can actually write, because I'd never written. I was a philosophy minor and did history and that kind of stuff, but had never written online. So I think that confidence. And then I think the big thing was like really the idea that, like niches are much bigger on the internet than you think, even when you know that the niche is bigger than you think. And he calls it this idea of like a personal monopoly, which is instead of writing about like tech, right? If you're like, I started kind of being like, all right, I like the Sixers, I like tech, I like business strategy and like pop culture. And so like, what if you just combine all of those things? I mean, like the beginning really was take Bill Simmons and Ben Thompson and kind of put their stuff together on an assumption that like Ben Thompson just would never get that unserious, that I'd be able to carve out like a niche of fun, but like still kind of rigorous business writing. And then over time I've like kind of softened that a little bit. Hopefully it's still fun to read and fresh and all of that, but it's like less, like here's how Britney Spears would think about Slack or whatever.
Yeah, I guess like once you discussed it in your cohort, right, of 50 people, at least you had this confidence that if nobody else, I have like 50 subscribers right there.
Totally.
Right.
Well, it was, I mean, like I had 300 followers on Twitter at that point. It was like mostly me tweeting about like the Philadelphia Eagles. And so I had to tweet and be like, dude, like my assignment this week is to get 20 subscribers. Like, please, 20 people subscribe, because I like don't want to ask. I like send it out because like I don't want to ask like one-on-one for anybody to subscribe to this thing. I was like embarrassed. I thought my friends would talk shit on me for writing on the internet, like all this stuff. And so like, that was the original 20. It was just like nice enough souls from Twitter who were willing to subscribe. And then the first year it grew from like 200 to like 400 people. It was, like super slow growth for a little while, but it was on the side. I had another job.
Right.
It was like mostly a links roundup as opposed to like writing long essays, and I'd do the occasional essay. So when I went full time, it started growing faster, but at the beginning it was just like very slow growth and just kind of doing it. I mean, one of the reasons that I wanted to do it was we brought in this exec team that was, not super cerebral to the company that I worked at. And so I wanted to exercise my brain. The other was like, my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and like I have a pretty bad memory. And so I was like, I'm reading so much stuff. I at least need to like write down my thoughts on what I'm reading, so I like kind of remember it a little bit better.
Right.
And so, if nobody had subscribed, that would also be fine. The practice of writing has been really good. And I think about the world a lot differently now than I did before I started writing, but it's also cool now that like people engage with it and that it has all these other benefits.
I'm going to come back to how do you think about the world differently from when you first started writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell me more about this going up the content pyramid. I think there's this book, Snow Leopard. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it describes the content pyramid as, you first have to become a super consumer. That means you're passionate enough to be chronically online and consume this content.
Yep.
And then, the second step in the pyramid is you become a curator, which is, summing up those links.
Yeah.
And then the final step is you become a creator.
That sounds almost exactly right. I mean, like, for that Ben Thompson piece, I think that's like all of it there. I had become like, we could have debated like any one of his different pieces and I would have known it like kind of inside and out. So it was consuming that, like TechCrunch, I would read a bunch and all of that kind of stuff. Have always read a ton of books, but yeah, never really wrote.
So you were super consumer up until this point.
Super consumer up until this point.
Right.
And then like, I should go back and read some of the early links roundups. I don't know how they hold up now. Yeah. But I started to write too then. I started to write pretty early after I became a curator, but it just wasn't like kind of every week. But I wrote a piece early then. I forget exactly what it was called, but it was essentially like talking about unit economics through the lens of Shenyun, which you see the posters for all over New York and the country whenever they're coming to do their show. And so there's like some fun stuff there where there were like things that I was thinking about in my job or learning in my job, and then being like, oh, actually, like, you know, this could apply there. Like, let me just write about it. And, you know, to the earlier point, learned through the process kind of each time, and then brought that back to my job. So while I was still working, there was a back and forth. But yeah, I guess that's a good way to describe the pyramid.
For people who don't know, what was your job at the time?
I worked at this company called Breather. We did on-demand meeting and workspace, kind of like this studio, but without all the podcast stuff. You could rent it for, you know, an hour. People by the end could rent it for a month or a year to use as an office. And it was this like beautiful thing where there's a smart lock on the door. We designed the spaces beautifully, furnished them. Like, we had cleaners come in after each and every. It was like this like complex, overly complex, like Rube Goldbergian machine to give people access to space wherever they were in New York and 9 other markets. And it, like, you know, we had this by the end. We were fighting because we had moved up market a little bit into larger spaces. We were fighting against WeWork when they were being crazy, and Knotel, which was like their whole strategy was like try to out crazy the craziest company in the history of the world in WeWork. And then we were this like little guy that hadn't raised a lot of money, founded in Canada. And so we had this wild strategy where we'd like take the big spaces, but then you didn't have to get as much space because you had a network around it. And so like it was like this living, breathing network of spaces that we, you know, kind of controlled end to end. And then ultimately, I think we brought in new management, and they're like, let's just go like almost exactly like WeWork. We're going to pay brokers like, to get us like just disintermediate ourselves. Like the whole thing was just like, we didn't probably have a shot anyway, because it was such a hard business model to lease a space for 5 years and rent it for as little as an hour. You could get a premium on it. And I think we got really smart about how to price it and manage the system. But to go head to head against WeWork with like, you know, $30 million versus billions was just like an insane move that was never going to work.
But at the same time, WeWork was also, I think, 2019 onwards, or even post-COVID, that was also, you know, probably not going to survive. It was becoming obvious.
Yeah. And I mean, like, obviously there is something, people love the product.
Oh yeah, people, exactly, which is, people love the product. There's something about the business model.
And you can do the business model fine, and you can do the business model well. You cannot do what they were doing, which was, you know, we would, by the end, we were looking at the same spaces that we were, and we had a really good both real estate team and data science team. We had this like underwriting model that ended up being like, even for the spaces that we'd rent hourly, like 98% accurate, 95% accurate, depending on kind of the city and the space on what those spaces would do like by month over the course. Like, we were really good at underwriting spaces.
Right.
And half the spaces that we looked at that WeWork was also looking at and they put offers in on, we're like, there's just no chance in hell in a million years that no matter what you did, you're making money on that space. And so you're locking yourself into a 5-year commitment and then putting a bunch of CapEx into the space. It just like, it made no sense. And in order to grow, they just like spent insanely. It's also like real estate, commercial real estate is a very big market, but somewhere like New York, for the types of like tech customers that you're going after, like you're really looking in Flatiron or Union Square or maybe Soho. There's like these little pockets. Yeah. And so those in particular just went like parabolic compared to the rest of the market. And so like the WeWork demand was big enough, and Knotel, and we didn't move the market, but we were a price taker, unfortunately. But that demand was big enough that like it just made everything like even less sustainable in a good market like New York.
I'm thinking out loud here. For something like this to work, we were going off on a tangent, but like since you brought it up, would it be a holding company that has all these bespoke, you know, sort of co-working spaces and communities like New House, Soho House, some of these, right? Like they all have their own niches, their own business models, and then, you know, maybe.
Yeah.
And you cater to very different audiences, and maybe the part of the value is in, you know, the scarcity and, you know, your unique taste. And
that's hard too, right? Because like Soho House is going private now.
That's
because, you know, like a lot of people are like, they've kind of lost that ability to pick the right, you know, the right people to join. And like, if you're selling on exclusivity, when the thing, like it's like the hot new restaurant in New York that is like incredibly hot until it's not anymore. And then it completely falls off. So I think like that can work. There are also like, there are plenty of models where a landlord owns a building and they're like, you know what, we're going to turn three of our floors into flexible space. Yeah. There are operators who will help them do that. Companies like Industrious who've done pretty well. Convene is just like high quality office with some event space, which can be very profitable, and meeting space. And that just serves like kind of a corporate customer, but with some taste and quality. You can also go like before WeWork, it was a company called, it was Green Desk, and then it kind of like evolved. And they were just like really cheap desks kind of. And like people need that too. And so I think there are different ways to segment the market. I just think like real estate is a really hard thing to grow really fast.
Right.
And you're locked in, through cycles, and your customer demand, goes like this. And so like you just need to be, I think you need to grow very, very carefully.
How did you get involved with Breather, and would you do something in real estate again?
I would make that decision at the time again, and I would not probably. I mean, I have the dream job, for myself, so I wouldn't change that. I found Breather on AngelList. Actually, I was working finance, had applied to business school, and was getting ready to go, and just was like starting to toy around with AngelList, and was looking at their job section at one point. I like wanted to go to business school to like ultimately go work in startups, and then I was like, what if I just like skip paying just $200,000 and like go do somewhere and take a huge pay cut, but like I'm not in debt at least, so let's do that. Found Breather on AngelList, and the thing that appealed to me was like in banking, there were times when like in the middle of the day I would just like go to a bathroom stall and just like sit there to hide out and like get a little bit of rest.
Yeah.
And so I was like, whoa, like, because none of it existed yet. So I was like picturing these like perfect spaces right by me. And I was like, whoa, if I could just like go across the street for an hour and just like read or something, as opposed to like sitting in a bathroom stall. Like, and then over the next like couple of weeks, like just like the different ideas that I kept having for what you could do with a network of spaces like this, like I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And so it was time to make the final decision to go to school. I was like, can I like get my deposit back? And they're like, nope. I was like, could you like defer me a year? They're like, nope. And I was like, all right, cool. Well, I'm going to interview for this company. So I interviewed for just, kind of because I was already interviewing with Breather for a company called 7 Rooms that just got acquired for $1 billion+ when there were like 3 people there. So that financially would have worked out a lot better. But then Breather just like it got its hooks in me. And so like, the interview process was, I had to go up to Canada and meet with the team. There was no role, so I had to write a job description for like what a U.S. person might do. It was like general manager, but
this is the real MBA.
Yeah, this was the real. I mean, a lot of this was. I had to go to the Ace Hotel lobby in like Nomad Flatiron, and then I had to go to like a Marriott business lobby because one of the co-founders was like the design co-founder, and she wanted a presentation on like the differences and those 2 lobbies and how they made you feel and all of that. And then for one of them, I had to go. Julian Smith, the CEO, was like, "There's a guy at Uber in New York who does something similar to the type of thing that you'd want to do here. Go find him, have him interview you, and blah, blah, blah." And so I went out to Queens to Uber's first New York office, found Josh Moore, who's awesome and has become a friend, and had him interview me there. And I guess, past that. And it was interesting. Like, I think Julian is like, sleeves of tattoos, gauge earrings. Like the fact that I came from finance, like, was a negative. Like, the only thing that I think was good about it was it showed that I could like work a lot. And so that was good. But I had also started a party bus company, this company called like, Throgo. It was like a stupid name. But I wanted to like teach myself to code. So I like built this dog shit. I wish I had like just paid to keep it up. HTML web and CSS website where there was like a Spotify embed and like, I made the logo in Photoshop, and it was like complete trash. But we did party buses from New York to Avalon, New Jersey, where I went because there's no good way to get there, and then to the Hamptons. And he liked that experience more because I had to do marketing, I had to do operations, I had to I didn't do insurance. So I got very lucky there that nothing bad happened because it would just be like 50 drunk kids going down to the beach and back. But it was so much fun.
You really did get lucky.
Yeah, I got very lucky.
That is such an interesting experience. I think like that entire interview process, they were looking for somebody who stands out, and they were looking for someone who had agency and, well, in many ways, the right fit for a startup. But in many ways, someone who's in banking, it's from like, I guess, the tech industry looking into the banking industry, you're usually looking at lower odds of finding someone like that. Was banking like the mistake, like sort of, or
I don't think there's any mistakes on this.
There's just no mistakes. But how did you decide on banking as a career? I guess
I thought finance was fascinating. Just kind of generally, growing up, my dad as a consultant, but we would talk about finance a bunch. Like at Duke, it was an econ major because we didn't have finance, but we had an amazing kind of former Goldman bond trader. Emma Raziel was like the most popular kind of professor in the econ department. And like she got a bunch of us, worked up about finance. Lehman Brothers, the year before the crash, had a case study competition that me and two other folks won, and we got to like go up to Lehman and interview for jobs, and then like literally they crashed after that. But like I'm actually reading More Money Than God, the Sebastian Mallaby book on hedge funds now, and like there's a lot about that I love. Like I do think investors probably get bad rep generally, whereas like there's you have to be like kind of broadly. It's a good excuse. You don't have to be, but it is a good excuse to like know a little about a whole lot of things, which I think is really fascinating. And then you have to like kind of prosecute your beliefs as in the form of a trade. And so I think all of that is really, really cool. One, I don't think I was like, I had plenty of friends who were smarter who were better at it than I was. And like, that's just like not my, like being like the most precise is probably not my forte. The other was like, some of these guys just like loved it, like really, really, really loved it. And I didn't. And so that was a good sign that I was like, all right, I'm going to go to business school. I like liked startups. I like, I worked for one in college, and like all like kind of, baby step stuff, but it was what interested me a whole lot more.
Oh, that's fascinating. I guess if you won that business case competition for Solomon Brothers, you said? Lehman Brothers organized it, right? That probably gave you the confidence and probably gave you the signal that this is something you're naturally good at.
I was with two other smart people on the team, so like, yeah, maybe. I think actually both of them still work. They do. Still work in finance and have like gone on to have great careers, and so like, it taught me that I could like present, which that was probably one of the skills. They were like, I don't think I would have been bad at it. Like they were just like, I have friends who are just like exceptional at it, and they like absolutely love it, and like they're doing the thing that they should be doing, and I'm glad that I was able to like kind of bounce, like be comfortable bouncing around enough to find the thing that I think I should be doing.
I guess like early on in your career, you sometimes get these signals that, give you the confidence or the belief that this is your thing, right? And you double down on them because you've probably gotten some advice that double down on your strengths and, you just go chase those. But in that stage, you sometimes don't get to explore some other parts of you that, you might also be really good at. And maybe, those are worth going down. And I don't know how you get into that exploratory phase, like early on in your career, or...
I mean, for me, it was like literally the party bus company was one of
that was it.
One of the ways that I did it, and like reading pretty broadly and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, like if you're doing your job right, and as an analyst in investment, like you don't have a lot of time to go explore.
You got to do it everything in the bathroom break. Hiding out,
and cell phones weren't even that good back then, so you couldn't even do that much on your phone. I remember like we were transitioning from Blackberries to being able to get the app on your iPhone if you wanted it at that point. So like, yeah, you couldn't even hide in the bathroom and do very much. But yeah, I don't know. It was great. Like I think each one of the experiences is like super valuable. I do think that ability to like just grind ends up being fairly valuable.
If you look back, what parts from each of those experiences shape, your career today or the person you are today and play a role in your career?
I mean, I do think finance was just like the ability to grind. Like my MD was from South Philly. I'm from outside Philadelphia, but like Italian dude would like just fucking scream at people, but awesome. He's like best, like really, really good at his job.
Right.
Like at one Christmas party, I got him like a fireman, like, sexy fireman calendar because I got him for Secret Santa. And like, he loved me after that. Like there's things like that where like, if you do your job well and fuck around a little bit, like I had that in high school too, where like, I would write like the funny version of the essay that we had to write, but it was really well written. And so like you could get away with that kind of stuff. So like seeing that applied, that you could like still have fun with it kind of as you grew. But like, then also I would, be in the office for 45 days in a row and like, be totally fine with it. Like you just have to turn off kind of part of your brain where you're like, all right, I'm just not going to assume that I'm going to be able to go have fun. And like, I'm just going to work because like good things do take hard work, particularly like, I think one of the things that's carried over to Not Boring Now is like, there are people who are way smarter than me. The essays that I think are the best are when I'm not trying to like win on smartness, but like just outwork people. Like this last essay that I wrote, Electric Slide, was 40,000 words. I thought like a few people would like, I thought like a handful of people were really going to like it. And like everyone else would be like, why the fuck did you send us 40,000 words? And it turns out that like it's the most shared piece like by over 3x that I've ever had. And on Upworking, the feedback has been amazing. And that was not because I've been like, I like have some genius insight into the way that like the electric stack works, but really because I was just like, this is fascinating. I don't understand that. And so I'm going to go spend like 2 days trying to understand like that little tiny piece of this whole thing. And then like rinse, wash, repeat until I kind of understand how the whole thing fits together well enough to explain it to other people. So I think that was there. From Breather, it was, I mean, like certainly the hard work again, like for the first year, I was like cleaning these little spaces myself when we couldn't get people, but also, you know, hiring a team. Actually, I think like it probably, I already had the love of strategy, like maybe being born to consultants like does that for you, but like seeing that actually play out in practice, like for both good and bad, I think was really valuable. Like I think of VCs, I probably overweight strategy more than other folks do. You know, we at one point, I've told this story before, but like because we had an investor who was also an investor in Uber, they were like, Uber won by getting a ton of supply. You have to go out and get a ton of supply, get one new space on the map every day for the next year. Uber has non-contracted, you know, like part-time, non-employee drivers who can come on and off the system. Yeah. We were signing 5-year leases and then doing construction and buying furniture and all that. So it was like a terrible analogy. And we did it, which, you know, like it shows, I think, like having the wrong goal can like really screw you. Like you can do the best, like that was an almost impossible thing to pull off, and we pulled it off, and I think we did a really good job, and it put us in the hole. And so like gross margins on our spaces, not net margins, but like, you know, just across the portfolio, what we paid versus what we got out on the spaces themselves were negative 25%. And then me and this guy, Ben Rollert, who is at Composer now, which I love, who ran data science for us and then product, spent Christmas break just being like, how do we fix this? And we like figured out this like whole plan to fix it. It's like maybe the first time that I wrote like a strategy thing. Like we wrote this long doc together. We like shared it with the exec team, then with the company, and we like rallied them around it and you know, got people excited about it. And they like understood because we wrote clearly what you know, they wanted to do, what we needed them to do. A bunch of them had to like change what their job was pretty dramatically. And like everyone just rallied behind it and it worked. And so that was cool. And then we brought in this team, as I mentioned before, who like threw strategy out the window. It was like, it's all about execution. And then like just ran the thing like pretty much right into the ground. COVID, I think, helped them save face, but like it was heading that way, like almost inevitably at that point. And so I think it really showed me that like, no matter how hard you work, if you're like running in the wrong direction, you like might as well just be like reading a book and enjoying yourself, because like that's worse than you know, not working hard at all, I think.
So okay. You know, the ton of things to dive deeper into there, but that would mean spend a lot more time strategizing. And because if you're like, if the, you know, baseline, you know, everybody agrees that these people are great at execution, just don't go run in the wrong direction. And you will, oftentimes you will, which is fine. Some things you will only learn by running in the wrong direction, but for the big stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's right. There's certainly like some of it is, you know, we wouldn't have come up with the strategy that we had come up with at Christmas break had we not had like 4 years of experience working in the company. And so there were like things that we needed to iterate our way towards. I also think that probably saying that like you don't need to have a good strategy in the beginning, you just need to execute, is like kind of cope a little bit as well. Like I look at Ramp and like they've pretty much just executed against their strategy from day one. And you see that show up, like they are just exactly, I wrote this piece.
And you're an investor in Ramp.
Yeah. And I wrote this.
Oh my God, congratulations on what, 3000x?
No. I didn't get in that early, unfortunately. But I think it will be a 3000x, you know, at some point in the future, because I do think like their growth is incredibly durable and like they're just amazing. They keep moving faster as they get bigger, which is crazy. Like all of this. But I wrote this piece in defensive strategy a couple of years ago. And like part of the argument was what I was just saying about like the right direction. But the other is like, I love this book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rummelt. And he talks about the strategy kernel which has the diagnosis, like what's going on out there, what are people not doing in the market, what do people need, like just what's the landscape, the guiding policy, which is like just generally how are we going to approach this opportunity, and then coherent actions. And like coherent is the key word there, where it's like all these things that if you like put them together form this chain link that almost nobody else can do or copy without doing all of the things that you're doing. Like you couldn't just take like Walmart's low prices and be like, all right, we're going to underprice Walmart. Like you have to do all the other things that Walmart does in order to offer the low prices and make money. And I talked about the fact that like coherent actions with the right strategy, like it just compounds over. Like you can set up your actions such that they build on each other, and then like it does, compound in your product and your velocity, like all of that stuff. And then you look at Ramp and it like really is like the company personification of that idea of like, from the beginning, it's like we're saving customers time and money, sticking to the core, and then only adding kind of like products that like contribute to that goal. Now they, had worked in a company that saved customers, consumers, but customers time and money at Paribus before that. And so I think they learned a bunch of stuff, and then in Capital One. And so they came with that experience already, which is maybe one of the reasons that second time founders work, because you like have learned a bunch of lessons, and then you can just kind of like start with the right strategy for the space on day one. But I do think like you just like don't waste valuable time and excitement. And Jerry Newman writes about this like uncertainty window, which is like the only kind of moat that startups have. And I think there's like really something to that. And so like if you're not wasting time in that period where you have the advantage of uncertainty, like you're just better off. Like you can just get further and like get to the point where you kind of have moats by the time that other people try to copy you.
Explain more about the uncertainty window.
Yeah, so he goes through, and I'm going to blank on the name of this series, but this like great series on kind of startup strategy and moats, and goes through and talks about like all these different things where like startups actually can't get differentiated profits from all of these different things. Like the only thing naturally available to a startup is like not, I think, counterpositioning, and he might say this as well. Counterpositioning's job is to like extend the period that you have before someone can compete with you, but it's like not a permanent moat. But all of the other ones are like, if you have IP, the value is actually like in the IP, and it's not like really something that like this. There's just like a bunch of different things where he like goes through and takes like all the different things from Hamilton Helmer's 7 Powers about like how companies get power, and like you don't have those in the beginning of a startup. The one thing he says that you do have is like uncertainty. So like Airbnb, by the time that people realized it wasn't completely idiotic to have people sleeping on your couch, they were already big enough that like they had a network, and they learned to take beautiful pictures, and that worked, and they learned like how to grow the thing and how to acquire new hosts. And like by the time anybody else tried to repeat what they were doing, they already were like a real enough company with some network effects and like actual moats. And there's like a bunch of these other examples where like it's one of the reasons that something that looks stupid actually like can end up working. Like most things that look stupid don't, but that like that period where everyone thinks it's stupid, if you're moving in the right direction and like learning and building on yourself, then you actually come out moated. Jerry actually in Colossus, Patrick Shaughnessy's magazine today, wrote a piece on the fact that AI does not have this similar dynamic, and like actually he thinks it's like the late stage of Carlotta Perez's techno-economic paradigm, like of the internet paradigm, and that he compared it actually to like the shipping container, and like one guy for a little while made money on shipping containers, but like actually it was just like this great consumer surplus event. And so he goes through a lot of like the same reason that there's absolutely no uncertainty in AI. Like all the big labs are spending a ton of money on it. The big companies are spending a ton of money on it. Like it does not have similar dynamics to like early PCs where people thought this is like really stupid, and it took IBM like a decade to get into it. And then the New York Times finally mentioned computer, like all of that kind of stuff is like a normal dynamic here. And I think his point is like, maybe OpenAI ends up making a lot of money, but like he doesn't see there being like a ton happening at like the application layer because there's just not this uncertainty.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Well, amongst the many, case against AI analyses that are coming out.
This has been, I've been on this train from day one. He said it better than than I did. But AI was like one of the examples that I used in the strategy and moat piece at the same time. That was like very much based on stuff that he'd written before. But I think he put better words to what I was saying. But I've been saying forever, like this is going to be an incredible consumer surplus event. It's like very hard to see how,
and very hard to develop moats in a consumer surplus event. Is that the case he's making?
I think like he's like, you can get, like some companies will make a lot of money and they'll get lucky, or like they'll be in the one thing that like the labs didn't try to go for and whatever. But like to be an investor investing in this stuff now, like it is just like very unclear how you would actually make money in a way that like in 0 to 1, and I'm writing a piece now that had me reference this, and I don't want to be like a 0 to 1 boy, but Peter Thiel talks about the fact that, at PayPal or LinkedIn or wherever, all the value was based on profits 10 years in the future. And that like two things are true. One is that growth is like undervalued and underappreciated by people, even inside Silicon Valley, but certainly outside Silicon Valley, even once you've like realized that growth is really important. And then the second is like that all of that is conditioned on the durability of that growth. And like he specifically says, like, will this thing be around in a decade? And like that is the question that I have a really hard time answering in the affirmative for a lot of these AI companies. Like I'm having a hard time picturing IPO day. But I will be like spectacularally wrong on some of these. And there will be like $1 trillion company started right now that I wouldn't even take a meeting
in the AI apps category.
In the AI apps category. And like you just have to be comfortable with that.
I think there's some use cases that make a lot of sense and where you can build moats in the industry, but very few where there is going to be a winner take all moment. And if you're not in that company, then might as well not do that category at all.
Yeah. And his point is like the real moated ones are just like where capital is kind of a moat now. And so like OpenAI has been doing this for almost a decade now, and like they now can play with the big boys.
Yeah.
But like he's like, I'll think that we're in a new techno-economic paradigm from the Carlotta Perez perspective once people are able to train like foundation models on their laptop. And like once you have that kind of creative explosion, until like while that is locked in a few labs, like he just doesn't see it.
I mean, since we're in analysis mode, let's run another analysis. What do you think? How do you think RAMP outpaced Brex?
So I have a piece coming out tomorrow.
Okay.
Talking about some of this, not in the Brex context specifically, but I mean it is funny that it came out that RAMP crossed $1 billion in annualized gross revenue, and Brex just I think accidentally, not knowing the RAMP timing was coming out, or else I don't know why you would do this, announced that they had $700 million in annualized gross revenue, and they started 2 years before they started making revenue and launched their product 2 years before they crossed $100 million annualized gross revenue, I think a couple of years before. And like literally in a piece, the second piece that I read on RAMP, when they got valued at 1.1 billion and 1.6 billion back to back by D1 and Stripe, I have these graphs in there that's like, I know this sounds crazy, but like if there's two companies growing at these like different, even like super high growth rates, like this one with the higher growth rate, like just is way bigger and grows into its valuation way faster in a couple of years. And so I think like there's just been this tremendous focus on kind of trajectory and velocity, which was kind of the theme of that piece. I think saving time and money is this like really durable idea, and I think they were really, really right on that. I think like, and Brex has been an amazing company. I think like they've caught up a lot on the technical side. Like I think like they're doing like a lot of really good stuff, but I think like coming in and essentially being like, we're going to own this kind of tech piece of the market with something that also offers rewards and points, but is just like kind of a friendlier product for tech companies, is very different than like every company wants to save time and money, and they're all being, like classic, innovators dilemma type stuff. Like they're all being overserved by these the Amexes of the world. They don't need points and rewards. What they need is like actually understand their business, and like time is like a luxury now, and all of that. And so like, what if you built a product that did those things, and you start with expense management, and you can add a bunch of other things that do that on top of it. But what if you also did that with like a very like engineering and product led culture from like the beginning, to the point where like teams that are not run by engineers, and 99.9% of other startups are led by engineers at RAMP. I think there's this like very interesting dynamic.
And their CTO runs marketing, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm referring to. And I think there's this dynamic of, I'm still writing the piece until like trying to get the exact right words for this, but there's this dynamic of like, because they're focused on like how you make other companies more efficient, they also like, they almost dog food that on themselves. And so it's this organization that like at that level of revenue just still does move really, really fast. And has, I think, avoided a lot of the bureaucracy that like comes for even like the very best startups when they reach this scale, because there's just like a million examples of things where they're like, that's something that we should cut out and replace with software or just like common sense or whatever. And they're like ruthless about cutting that out. And then they can also, start building stuff for other companies that do that. And now they're just on like two totally different trajectories. And I do think like, as bearish as I just was about AI, and Joe Newman says this as well, like that companies that can like put it in the right place in their workflow actually benefit a lot more than like AI companies. And I think Ramp is going to be one of them, when your goal is to save companies time and money, and you can have agents that like do a bunch of the work that nobody wants to do in a company, like, and you've built your whole workflow such that like that stuff happens with software. And then you can have this like incredible team build agents to like go do some of that stuff for you. Like, it's just like very right place, right time for that bet. And so I do think it becomes like almost irresponsible like not to use Ramp at some point, which is exactly what an investor in a company should say. And I think what Keith Roboy had said on a podcast about them. But I actually think that is true. Like if they are saving companies 15% and saving them a bunch of time, like at some point, like you really should like, what are you doing? Not like still using Amex, for example.
It's an interesting like comparison. I guess it's also you keep making the Amex comparison for Ramp, and I guess they've also talked about it. They compare themselves to the very best in the business. They're not looking at any other company. They're like, oh, we're probably going to be the new Amex.
If you're like for all of these companies, we talked about this a little bit before. The
level of ambition is just
my whole thesis for generally is like that there are going to be a wave of companies built now that replace these like. I mean, in Amex's case, 140 years old, but often like at least 50-year-old kind of company, like the Boeings of the world and like the defense primes and like all of those companies. Some of them will do great and like, get fresh leadership and have their Microsoft moment or whatever. But a lot of them like have just gone through like the financialization of the 80s and 90s. And like they're, pulling in supply chains from all over the world. And like, it wasn't even the wrong move at the time. Like that was the era. You would have been punished like relentlessly if you had been like, nope, we're staying full stack and like vertically integrated and like everything's built here in the US of A. Like the company wouldn't exist anymore. So like they had to do a lot of these things, but they've gotten to the point where like they are just beatable now. Like there's a whole host of new technologies that companies can build on. And if you're building one of these companies and your goal is not to be like the very biggest in those industries, given the fact that you have like a fresh sheet of paper, capital markets that are very friendly to like the leading companies here. Anduril can raise as much money as it wants, as one example. If your goal is to not go out and like try to be the very best in the industry, like what are you even doing? That's what I love about these companies. Like you should try to actually go beat the incumbent, as opposed to being like, we're going to be this component that sells into the incumbents. It's like, I don't know, just go if they're like they really need you so much. Like if that component is so valuable, like use it to go compete with them.
I've come up with a new term right now. It might not be a new term for them. Replacement primes.
Yeah. Prime candidates for
replacement primes. That's what we're going to see in the like next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
That was a good analysis. Well, while we're on it, and while you brought up vertical integrators, especially in the hardware or like industrial category, can you define that for the audience? And do you think the reindustrialized movement is a little before its time?
Oh, I don't think there is a before its time. Like I think it needs to happen. The question will be timing and all of that. But like both as a matter of just like not even national security, just like national interests. Like you need to be a company or a country that is able to build its own things. You don't need to be an isolated, like everybody else pays 1,000,000% tariffs and like you're doing everything yourself. But like you at least need to have the capabilities to build a lot of this stuff, particularly the high value add stuff in the country. And so I don't think it's too early. I just think it's like, it's going to be very bottoms up. Like we were reindustrialized together. And like you think about the reindustrialized movement from the top down, you're like, well, this is impossible. Like, look at what China has going on. Like, there's no way we catch up to that. Like, even look at, like South Korea or wherever, like in all these different categories, like there are countries that are just like way better at this than we are. And then you meet a lot of these companies and you talk to the founders and you're like, oh yeah, well that's definitely going to work actually. And so like if enough of those like things definitely actually start working, then I think like you are just naturally going to have a bunch of jobs created here. I think, America is really, really good at putting its most talented people to work on, whatever the most lucrative problem ends up being and the most lucrative opportunity ends up being. For a while that, that was finance. For a while that has been software. And I think now that is going to be like, go rebuild kind of like all of our infrastructure, and all of these companies that we've like kind of taken for granted would be here forever. And that there will be like multiple kind of like $1 trillion+ companies built, which would have been like a crazy thing to say a few years ago. But now like there's plenty of $1 trillion companies, and OpenAI will probably be $1 trillion company in a couple of years, with plenty of competition. And so I think like the US capital markets and the US system is like really good at getting really exceptional people to go out and build the things that will create, a ton of value. And now I think we're at the spot where like just those opportunities happen to be at the intersection of kind of software and hardware. And so the vertical integrator thesis is, companies that use technology to build better, faster, cheaper products and compete directly with sclerotic incumbents instead of, kind of trying to like be a supplier. It's like, it's not deep tech. And I think deep tech is amazing, and I'm probably not smart enough to invest well in deep tech. And I view the kind of core difference as being like deep tech, you're taking some sort of like real science risk. Right. Whereas in vertical integrators, you're saying like, cool, did you just like come up with a new battery cell chemistry and like it actually seems to be working? Yoink, we're going to like pull that into our batteries. That's great. We're doing pack manufacturing. And then we're doing these like 5 other things to build like a system that takes advantage of better batteries. And so that to me is like the kind of main distinction. So
is it like, would you define it as a science risk versus an engineering risk?
Yeah, it's like, it's a science risk versus either engineering or like system design risk.
Okay. So you're like, oh, this system could have existed in this different way, and this is like 50% better, and or like 40% better, whatever that ends up being,
or like multiple times better.
And the business model is different. We can do way better, right? We're going to capture the market.
Yeah, and I think like
what would be an example or a couple of examples of that?
Yeah, so we were just talking about AstraMechanica before this, and I think they're a really interesting example where I wrote a piece on them about 1.5 years ago. And did like kind of a whole takedown on what happened with Boeing and all that kind of stuff. And there's all the stuff that we talked about, but there's also just like, we are now at the spot where you're just like making on like the traditional kind of like turbofan jet engine, you're making these like little trade-off. You're like, I don't know, do we want to be like a little bit more efficient or like get a little bit closer to, to going, supersonic? They can get up to like, 0.9, not Mach 0.9. And like, there's just not a lot of like room to innovate on like the actual like airplane itself, because like the engine is kind of like at its technological limits. And so if you're a company that needs to keep showing like growing profits and whatever else, like of course your seats get like squeezed and like you get less leg room and you get upcharged for everything else and flights are overbooked, and like of course that is going to happen because like there's nothing else to squeeze. And so like one of the ways that these kind of log jams get solved is that some new technology comes about and like kind of allows you to rethink the system. In Astro's case, that's this thing, the turboelectric adaptive jet engine, and like the key insight is that electric motors have like finally gotten powerful enough for their weight that you can include them in the engine without like messing up the math on your engine. You can ride the specific impulse curve so that you're not making this trade-off between like speed and efficiency that even the Concorde or even like a Boom would have to make, because you can just like use the electric motor to turn the engine and make it work at different speeds. And so you have this thing that like theoretically can go fast, efficiently, and compete as a private plane with kind of first class ticket prices. And then when you do that, like you open up the, private private airport network is like one place to do it. And you can get more of those built over time and like kind of decentralize that a little bit. You can do trans-Pacific flights in 2 hours, and like all this stuff gets unlocked by this one engine, but then you can build a whole new business model kind of on top of that engine.
But is the business model for this new engine that this is like, 10 times more efficient, cheaper than, the Rolls-Royce we're getting, easier to service, maintain, all of that. But in this case, they're They are serving to the prime. They're serving the prime. Like
No.
no. They wouldn't like sell
they'll
to.
build their own airframes. Is the idea.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so that's like the big thing on the vertical integrator piece. Like,
I see.
if you have this technology that is so much better than the thing that everybody else has,
why would
like,
you sell it to someone else?
This is the hard part. Why would you sell that to somebody else? And like now maybe they partner on like, you know, large commercial flights with an airline. They just announced that like United invested in them. So is there a world in which like,
but they're not a manufacturer, right?
Yeah.
Technically.
But like maybe they would make planes. Who knows what that would look like? But they want to operate on the private side. Like they want to operate their own kind of like almost Uber for
I see.
airlines.
So it's like they're going for the Gulfstream business model, which is to start with. Which is right.
Gulfstream Plus managed kind of airline on top of it for private planes, and a lot of the math ends up being like it is more efficient, or it's for its speed more efficient, but you can end up getting a bunch of savings based on the fact that the plane only flies 2 hours where it would fly like 7 hours normally, and so you get like savings on the pilots and the crew, and like there's all these like little things that add up to make it the same price to fly private at like 3x the speed as it would cost you to fly first class on a normal plane and face delays and all of that kind of stuff. And so like, I don't know, we're years away from that actually, like from you being able to take a supersonic flight.
But it's worth funding.
But it's worth funding. Yeah. And I think like there's, ways to make a bunch of money kind of in the interim. Yeah. And it just seems like the right place, right time for this. And I think like you see those kind of opportunities in a bunch of categories. In part, I mean, like this one was just a clear example of like motors have finally gotten good enough for this to happen. There's others where it's just like we just haven't, there hasn't been the funding environment, or like there's been like this one missing piece, or for whatever reason for the past 50 years we've focused a lot more on software than on hardware.
Right.
And now like there's just this almost treasure trove of like, it's not like I think that is like that view like oversimplifies and is like, what the hell were people doing for the past 50 years and nobody realized that and I think like it's just like the right spot in like it's the right time to compete with the incumbents, and it's the right time technologically to build the new thing, and the funding environment is there. It's like there are a million reasons why right now seems to be very...
Everyone's focus has shifted, and it seems to be the right timing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. We're going to go back to the, talking about the media businesses, and we started off talking with the Substack platform. I was listening to your interview with David Perell, and in that I think he mentions that how he gives this very interesting analogy, which I also just thought of as well, was that YC was primarily an education business. And their thesis was that, if there's more content and education around how to create a business, how to register an LLC, how to grow a company, then there will be more founders. And so they had this whole venture capital became the business model around it. And then he describes that, in media as well, if you're at a certain stage, newsletters can have venture capital as a business model, or podcasts, 20 VC, Harry Stebbings, can have venture capital as a business model. You're 5 years into this, and you mentioned that Not Boring is a completely standalone, thing, and the Not Boring Capital is a standalone thing. But how do you see the future of, I guess, tech media? We're specifically talking about tech media here,
Yeah.
What do you see the future of tech media becoming?
I think the future of question on any of these is tough. I think the interesting thing that happened in like 2020 and 2021 is that media generally meant that you could start a venture firm. So if you were like a really popular like YouTuber who did something completely unrelated to tech, because you had eyeballs and money and access, you like could get into some stuff and like throw a bunch of checks in. And I think a lot of those people have stopped doing as much venture because it's like not the thing that they were focused on doing. I think you bring up Harry and he's like ended up raising larger and larger funds and is doing a really great job. And that's because he's been like obsessively focused for the past since he was, I think, 11 on just like interviewing every investor that he possibly could to learn how to get really, really good at venture. And now is interviewing founders and people in the different roles in different companies. And so, of course, you monetize like
a 10-year apprenticeship later.
Yeah, 10-year. Like, of course, you monetize that through venture. I think in part because like it's a good business model. Like it's just it is if you can pull it off, a good business model. And if you're any good, it can be a great business model. But also because like, I think kind of the point I was making earlier about just like investors generally, like to have all of that knowledge and that curiosity and like some competitive streak, and to not go out there and see if you could like actually play the game. I think it's like I almost like don't trust anybody who doesn't want to like go see if they can play the game. There are some obvious exceptions. Ben Thompson has built like a phenomenal business where he's like fully like just by the book, like I will not conflict himself in any way, and I respect the hell out of that. But I think if you're focused on kind of tech and venture specifically, either big firms are starting to have been for a while trying to do, but I think Eric at A16Z is like doing a really interesting job early on. I think Founders Fund has probably done a better job than anybody by like kind of decentralizing it and having pirate wires kind of like
probably the best model
in their orbit.
Sorry.
Not at all. I think like Contrary Research is doing some really great stuff.
True.
And so like the venture funds are getting kind of good at, I think obviously what Patrick is doing, with Positive Sum and Colossus and like that whole team that he's building, like that's really, really interesting. And then there's like a million
acquired. Do they have a growth fund now?
I don't know if they have a growth fund now.
Oh.
I know they've been thinking about it, but I don't know if they do or not. But David in particular does kindergarten, and those guys are great too. There's just like a bunch of these, and everyone kind of is playing in different flavors. Whereas I think like, and I did a little bit of this too on the first fund, was just like, that looks like a hot company and I have an audience, and so I bet I could get into that. Whereas now it's like a lot more like Harry is going like European companies, and Patrick is, I guess, has a pretty wide mandate, but like things that require like a lot of research, and they're building out like a pretty great research team, and are doing some like really, really interesting things over there. And so I think like if you really like venture and tech, it is a really good way to monetize. I think a lot of people found that if like you don't actually really care, like it becomes annoying to have a bunch of LPs be like, what are those like 50 dog shit companies that you like you'll load our money into? And so like I think it's like a natural shakeout. So it's not like the future of business models for media generally, but I think for this particular type of thing, it's an interesting way to do it. And then of course, like, Jordy and John have not done a venture fund, and they could get into anything they want. TBPN is amazing, and so maybe they do down the line, but like maybe they can just be unbiased, and I think probably build the greatest kind of like sponsorship driven business in the history of tech media. And so there's just a million different ways to do it depending on what you're going for.
What do you think differentiates TBPN? The rise is meteoric because
those guys are just fucking awesome. Right, like I think, like I honestly, like they do a great job. Their team is great. Producer Ben is great.
Great sense of humor.
The interns are great. They're super well connected. They're actually like really knowledgeable. Like you can go deep on a bunch of different companies and business models with those guys. They're both founders, which I think is probably underappreciated. Jordy, we invested in Party Round / Capital, his last company, and actually wrote about them and talked about like the company's taste before taste became like the buzzword. And so now when you have a thing where you don't have to put like a bank in between Jordy's taste and like the product, like that's like almost bound to succeed, because I think he is like one of the most creative and tasteful founders that I've met, but like pairs that with a good business sense. They're just really good. I think like you can't, I know the information is doing like TITV or whatever, and I'm sure a bunch of other people are working on like kind of like, what if we were just like all over Twitter and we like did every day, and I think that's like this piece of it, but they're just really fucking good.
It doesn't take off the same way. That's the thing. That's what makes me curious. Like so many people, the top of funnel of people experimenting with an idea that you've also had, it's so big, but it just doesn't stick. In many cases.
And this is there's one way to read that, which is like, so like go out and follow your dreams anyway, because like you might be the one to succeed. And there's also like, please keep in mind that like Jordy and John are really fucking good, and they've been trading for like this for a while and building their network and their knowledge and whatever. And so like I do think there is like in a lot of these like talent does really matter, and the fact that they both have talent and their chemistry is so good is like sometimes it just like works.
And John had been at that point, I think this launched last year, had been doing YouTube for 4 years. And had grown a significant audience there, right? And I think I saw one of his very early interviews. He is so extremely analytical about every single part. I did not realize. He's like just constant, and he's like the biggest critic of like all their channels and just critically analyzing what works, what doesn't work, why does it work,
Yeah, he's the Eric Tornbridge thing is called Turpentine for this great quote that I think Stripe Press uses too, and all that, like that when art critics get together they talk about paint or whatever, and when artists get together they talk about where to get cheap turpentine. And I think John is like very much seems to be one of those guys who like really cares about like how you actually put the thing together.
Right.
So all this to say, like, don't try to compete with TBPN because like it's like I think it's just like it's just this perfect storm of things.
And another interesting thing I uncovered was while preparing for our interview was that John first talked about a live stream on like Twitch or something about 2 or 3 years ago, and he was like, he wasn't sure if it would work.
Huh. That's amazing.
And well, lo and behold, it worked. Not on Twitch, but like you just streamed it across platforms. And there's something about just thinking about an idea and strategy, I guess, going back to for a while and finding the right partners to do it with, the right model, and growing the network that's needed for something to succeed. What another excellent opportunity to plug Ramp, the official business card of Not Boring, who like one, I think, like they've been close with those guys for a while, but there is also something tremendous about like being this size and scale and being this all over the feed and still somehow like being cool. Like the fact that like a Ramp sponsorship has even gotten like cooler and it's become gotten cooler, 100%.
Status signal is an amazing, like, how do you even pull that off kind of thing?
I think in an era where like, personal brands are always trumping company brands, TBPN has found a way to outperform, and including like making corporate sponsorships cool.
I know. And when you think of their corporate sponsors, like there's a bunch of good ones. Wander, we love, like there's a bunch of great ones, but like you associate them with Ramp.
100%. Which is, I mean, I'm sure they've gotten way more inbound since they did that. They're like, everyone's trying to get a Ramp sponsorship at this point because which is very interesting. So how is the Substack has changed a lot? We were talking about it as a platform, and how do you see it now? Because I've been seeing this recently where a lot of people are now making either a comeback to Substack or making an effort to be more active on Substack, including like, the tech Twitter elite circle you would see that's very active there is now making an effort to be more active through notes on Substack.
Yep.
Right. Pirate Wires made a comeback on the platform. TBPN started live streaming on the platform. They started a newsletter called The Current Thing. Right. So Freethink Media, they've grown. It's just astronomical growth. Their Big Think newsletter has like 500,000 subscribers, and they started in Jan.
Jesus.
And they found this incredible product market fit, and they were considering, making Substack their primary thing. And I'm like, okay, so I've been seeing this since January, that, there was a while, it was crickets for last year on Substack. There was not enough critical mass of people on notes, but now you're seeing they've must have done an incredible job at recruiting the network.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, it was nothing, and everyone's coming to Substack. So what are you experiencing? What are you thinking in terms of that platform?
I really like Substack. I think, Not Boring doesn't happen without it, all of that. I think like really it's just like they do a lot of the basic stuff really well. And then now they've built this place where just like links work, and links to writing are just like the primary content on the Notes app, and where there's like a bunch of people who are like explicitly there to like read stuff. And I think like almost their performative incentive is to be like, oh, I read all these like cool things, and like it's a lot of people like quoting different authors and whatever, and so it's like at least a faux and probably like a semi intellectual community who like wants to read different stuff. There's obviously like it's gotten big enough now where there's like a bunch of subcultures on like there's like 1,000 former prostitutes who write about their experience, and there's like a bunch of tech people, and there's a million like AI blogs, and you have things like the Free Press. I think was on Substack. I think that really helped to show that you could grow like a big independent media brand with a bunch of different pieces and do it in a custom way. I think like I think one of the knocks people have always had is like, well, I don't want it to look like all the other Substacks, but if you're big enough, if you're Pirate Wires, if you're them, you can go and say like,
we'll help you customize.
We just want it to look like that. I think that's a huge deal, because then they just take care of all the shit in the background that you don't want to take care of. And writing teams, even at a good media company, or like that team is not going to be that big. And part of the beauty of this model is like the team doesn't have to be that big, and so Substack can just like handle all of that, great. And if they can bring you some more readers, like even better. So I think that's kind of what's going on there. But it's interesting to see that it's like in its Notes feels like it's in its like awkward early days where there's like a bunch of people like being, I called it profundity Timu the other day, because like it's just a lot of people saying like bullshit profound stuff that like it's just like pretty nauseating. And so like there's a lot of that, and like over time like Twitter would have the the defense mechanisms to have like that person would just get absolutely like crushed or not. I mean Threads worked for a while, but like you don't see that crap like nearly as much on Twitter anymore. And so Twitter has its benefits for being maybe like a meaner place. But now there's like an economy of people who've sprung up on Notes that make fun of the people who do like that, and they do like shit posts that are like, so it's like funny.
There's
it's
some
like,
discouragement going on, and I see.
Yeah, and Venkatesh Rao's over there, like like kind of just categorizing how everything, like what's a thud post versus a like whatever, and just like he's very. So it's like it feels like an early interesting ecosystem. We'll see where it goes, but it doesn't like. If you had asked me when the Notes Twitter thing was going on, I was like, oh, it's like a pretty interesting foothold. Like maybe it works. And then I would have been like, oh, no chance. Like nobody's on Notes. And now it like really feels like there's a potential for like some sort of ecosystem to develop over there.
Yeah, well, I think ever since Twitter became the town square of intellectuals, there's been an effort to recreate another one.
And it's like always failed.
Yeah. So here we are again, like wondering if this is going to be it. Okay. The jury's still out there. What advice would you have for me? I started Substack first, so I had like, I was hosting events for a couple of years and, had about 10,000 signups. I picked like an audience from there. I was like, okay, a lot of people randomly sign up for events, who actually attended, and Luma gives you all that information, right? Like who actually attended. So it ended up being like 3,500 people who attended at least one event. I just moved them over to Substack. I'm like, hey, you've always asked like your firesides never have a recording. Now they will. But it's in a podcast form, and sure, we'll do events every now and then. Imported that, and I just felt like whatever platform is still like smaller relatively is like a easier place, but relatively easy, never easy, but relatively easier to grow there, because YouTube is like a black box. I don't know. You recently also started a podcast, and you mentioned like you experiment with these new things. You also started boring news, and so what's the thought process with these different formats, and like what are you, when you think about platforms, how do you think, where should someone start out, and what would be your advice to me?
So I said all these good things about strategy before, and like a lot of this is just like trying shit. I think like really actually doing a couple of podcasts, like doing boring news, which was taking Polymarket, pulling it in, pulling like some of the stories of the biggest movement, and then using AI and an AI voice to like write these little short stories and like have it be this kind of like unbiased, markets-based news. It was like a really fun experiment. Marginal Revolution mentioned it, which was cool, and like all of that, but like nobody loved it. It was my robot voice talking about stories without like much personality. And like, could we have done more there? Like, yeah, but we kind of dropped it pretty quickly, but like very glad that we did it. Have been doing Hyperlegible, which like, I interview people who write my favorite kind of like essays of the past week or so. And I haven't done it for 3-4 weeks now, because I've been like, I was writing that electric slide piece and I just was so down the hole that like any minute I needed, I would do it. But I'll do that like kind of occasionally. The goal on like any of these is like actually not to get big. I mean, like it'd be cool if like we did Age of Miracles, the podcast on nuclear a couple of years ago. And that actually like was getting tens of thousands of views, like low tens of thousands of views on YouTube. Okay. And did well in Spotify.
That was with Turpentine, right?
That was with Turpentine, and Julie DeWall, who's the co-founder of Antares, was my co-host on that. And like that was awesome. But like the number one goal for that was, now I know a bunch of people in nuclear. We made a great investment in Standard Nuclear that kind of like came out of that podcast. And I like know what I'm talking about in the space just based on like 3 months or 4 months of like really focused effort there. So that's cool. I think with Hyperlegible, it's like there's a lot of writers who I love on the internet who like, some of whom I know, some of whom I don't know as well. And it's like a really good opportunity to like
talk to them,
get to know them a little better, get to know about their writing process a little better, but also just like, I do think, and this is probably like a writer's bias, but like, even if these people aren't like experts in the things that they've written about, like speaking for myself here, it's like no one has spent more time trying to condense the thing that they've been writing over the past, a couple of weeks into something that makes sense more than like the person who has to write and hit publish on it. And so I do think there's this like interesting kind of like compression almost of like this, like what they think is like a really big idea and like the thing worth writing about that is like really interesting to discuss with them. So it's like an interesting way to learn different things. But that is a podcast where I interview people who wrote an essay on the internet. Like it's not going to get very big. It's a niche. Like it doesn't need to get very big. I really enjoy doing it and learn from it. But I think doing a bunch of these, because I think like you see the YouTube algorithm blowing up and like people who didn't have video before now have video and like I see that, and like I really like doing Age of Miracles and that reached a different audience. It's like you see that and you're like, fuck, I should do video. And I'm like less convinced. I go in waves. I'm like less convinced about that now, where I'm like, the thing that I'm really good at is like writing like about complex things in a way that's fairly simple, because like I had to just learn it myself. And so I'm like explaining what I learned. And so like, can I just focus on doing more of that? I think that like really helps on the investing side as well. The podcast stuff can too, particularly Age of Miracles did. But it's all like now I view like it and the investing, like writing and investing is like the two core things that like really help each other. And then anything else like almost has to feed into them.
Right. So what would your advice to me?
Good luck. No, I don't know. Like I said, I've never been like super thoughtful about growth in this. I think I started writing at like a really good time. I think the advice is like, it's all trite advice. It's probably like harder to execute against, and I haven't executed against the whole time. And I think you can like see in my writing when I haven't, but like write about the things that would fascinate you to read, or like post the things that would fascinate you to listen to.
Have the conversations that I'm interested in.
Have the conversations that you're interested in. Do the like highest quality job with that you possibly can. And like, also don't worry if for like 2 years, I mean,
400 subscribers.
A year, there's 400 subscribers. Like, do something that like you would be happy doing, even if like nobody ever read it. And I like that sounds like one of the things that I'm talking shit that people would post on Substack notes, but like that is actually true. That like, posting that electric slide piece, I was like, you know what? Like, if nobody reads this, like, I actually finally know how like a drone works, which I like is a valuable thing to know. And so like, I'm super happy with that. And so I think that would be my main advice, because it is hard to break out. That
is actually how I started out, and then I hit publish. And then I saw views and I'm like,
I mean, I sound sanguine right now, but I will like at least I write off like the first couple hours after I hit send, because I'm like checking Twitter to see if like people shared it, or like, when I delete Twitter off my phone, I'll go on like Notes app, but then like LinkedIn if I posted it there, like of all places, I'm like, is anybody like sharing this on LinkedIn? Like,
anybody even liking it?
So it's like sanguine as I want to be, and I think it's the right advice in the moment for sure. Once you hit publish, you're like, people think I'm the biggest idiot in the world, or like,
should I stop doing this? Should I find another job?
This? Yeah, exactly.
But this is actually, I didn't know that, for the longest time, you had this zone where nobody was like looking at the content, right? Like almost a year. And I guess like all content creators do have that like phase, which, and you can never predict growth, right? You just continue doing what you're interested in. This is a good reminder. I'm like doing it as a reminder to myself. Continue doing it and try to produce the highest quality work. Okay. Interesting. So Substack, we did an interesting like platform analysis. You have you thought about what Not Boring becomes without Packy McCormick?
It goes away.
It goes away, right?
Yeah, totally.
So have you thought about adding contributors? How big is the team?
So I work with two guys, Aman and Sahaj in India, who are awesome. Emerging grant winners there.
Oh, cool.
And really, like, I mean, the other advice I was going to give here is like, I'm lucky enough to be in a position now to do this, because I think like venture as a business model enables you to do this. But I'm like a really big believer in like the things that are going to end up mattering like are not predictable. I just read Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned.
Right.
And like, I actually think the writing was like kind of dog shit, and like the argument was like kind of dog shit, but like the overall idea that like, you're not going to like get to the thing by like setting a goal and then like working really diligently, like, and like moving in that direction. I think that there's something to that, but I almost take it to an extreme where I'm like, you guys are really smart. Oh, you want to build like a tech tree? Like, awesome. Oh, you want to like, now the Sedge in particular is like looking into something. I'm not going to spoil it, but like almost completely different that seems like really cool. And like maybe it'll help not boring at one point, maybe it won't, but I like really like the idea of having kind of smart people around me who can like, they're the ones who built boring news. I wouldn't have been able to do that on myself. And so like who can do stuff like that I can't do when I need them to, but like who otherwise I'm like, I don't know, if I had the best idea for you, then like I shouldn't be hiring you almost kind of for what I need to do. Cause like all I need to really do is like invest in companies and produce a good essay a week. So I'd much rather like you come in, see like what advantages not boring can give you, and then like figure out the most interesting stuff that's like directionally related to what we're doing with that. And like, I think over time, not boring ideally becomes like more of that, like maybe with some more direction. And like, maybe at some point you get like, an executive editor or, like somebody to like massage things into some sort of shape. And that means we can just like have more voices from the outside kind of come in and write things that I couldn't write.
What's the biggest opportunity that's come up while doing this that was hard to pass on?
No, there've been a couple. I'm not gonna say. But yeah,
or just maybe describe the opportunity, not without specifics.
There was one that was like a company that I like really respected. I don't even know how to describe this company without giving it away. But like essentially the person was like, do you want to like, I don't know, come in and like your job would be
exactly this.
Your job would be kind of this, but it's just like talk strategy with the founders. Yeah. Pretty much. And like I'm glad I didn't take that because like that is the first job to go and anything, goes south at all. Right. But like given who the founders were, it's like if you told me a year before, I would have like just died on the spot getting that offer. So that one was cool. There's like obviously like larger venture fund stuff. But yeah, I could not design a job that I would like more because it is like the job that I get to design every day. And I'm like really not rigid. Like over the past, the last 3 essays that I wrote were 40,000 words on the electric stack, a post that was like talking about like Baudrillard and like a bunch of different philosophers and talking about meaning. And the one before that was like differentiation and market. So like, it's just me, which means I can kind of write about whatever I find most interesting. And I find now actually like those 3 have all done really well because they're not on one theme and because it's like maybe it's one of the few publications now that is not like every week talking about fucking AI. Even if I'll talk about it sometimes, like, and so like if I don't like my job currently, like I can just change it, which is like is very cool. So yeah, there's like really I don't think anything that I would do. Famous last words maybe, but I can't think of something.
How do you think about saying no to these opportunities or turning some of these down? And it could be, right? Like, for example, as the Free Press was growing, right, they recruited a few different podcasters. Like, they had, I think Tyler Coven started, became a columnist for them. And I don't know if the podcast became under the Free Press umbrella. You have Coleman Hughes, Conversations with Coleman became a part of the Free Press. And sometimes it is like probably like aligned with exactly what you're doing, but you get this big sort of
totally
multi-million or billion-dollar daddy that's funding the entire operation, right?
Totally.
So how do you say no to every time such an opportunity comes up?
I actually don't get those types of opportunities very often because I don't think Not Boring fits particularly well in anything because of what I just said about like what I like to write about. And I wrote that one after a month.
That's an example. Like, you've had different things come up, right? But the example is like where you did give one example where you had the opportunity to be like this strategy, person to the executives or founders, which is I think in a similar umbrella, right? Like they become the umbrella which absorbs, right, in a different structure. So how do you? It's like you're betting 100% on yourself and you're like, okay, if this is here right now, what's going to be on the table a year from now? And yes, I'll suck it up and, it'll be hard for the next year, especially early on, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think I wrote before that, like, there were things that then I was like, oh, well, if I'm getting this opportunity now, like, probably someone's going to ask me to be like the president of the United States next year. And so like, why would I ever, that'd be a terrible job. But like, they can only keep getting better and better. And I think like, that is stupid. And you should like look at each thing on its own merits. And so instead of saying like, no, I'm going to sell out for something cooler. It's like, do I like this or do I really like working for myself? And I think both were the case when I was like evaluating some of this stuff. But I do think like to think that like that rocket ship just like goes on forever is maybe it happens occasionally, but like it's super, super, super rare for that to be the case.
Almost like startup rounds. If you stop being hot,
100%.
The deals go away, the offers go away.
It's 100% like that. Yeah. Even if like things are going well, if they're not going like excellent, it just does. I wrote it was like end of 2023, a whole piece on this. So like the momentum just like really felt like it slowed that year. For like, you know, a whole bunch of reasons, I think external and internal. But I think like the bigger thing was that like, you like, because there are more, just like a higher volume of things. I think I did a bad job of being like, that seems like one person that I really want to spend more time with, or like that seems like a company that I like really want to spend more time with, as opposed to like, nope, wrote about them last week, I'm on to the next one. You know, like now I'm trying to be a lot more intentional about like, you know, this ramp piece is the 5th time that I'm writing about the company. I've written about base a couple of times, like fewer, smaller, get to know people better. Like all of that I think makes a lot more sense, and I like doing a lot more.
Go deeper on the companies you do have either in the portfolio or people you're interested in covering, and keep going deeper.
Covering and just like spending more time with. Like I think there's a lot of like, I don't know, 50 different people asked me to do something this month. Like I'm either going to say no to all of them or whatever, as opposed to like actually, you know, just being like, all right, ignore all the ones that like I would have not wanted to hang out with before this, and like just you know, hang out with people that I do. And so I think there's some of that. But again, like it's really hard to like it's not like things are like, it's not like I'm a billionaire or like everything is easy or like anything like that right now. But I just like very much feel that like everything, like probably spending too much time in vacuuming or a breather or whatever, like everything has kind of like, I'm like very happy with what's happening now. So like all this stuff has been good.
You and with David Perell and How I Write podcast, you were talking about like your creative process or like publishing process, and you know, you mentioned that procrastination is the process, which, you know, 6 hours before the deadline or 5 hours before the deadline is when you're on full steam. Do you think it's a feature for most creatives or some creatives? Like I'm like that.
I think it's unavoidable to some extent. I've gotten a little better at this recently, and it really depends on the piece. If it's like a thought piece, then it's like I can't do anything. Pretty much my hands are just like tied until a few hours before. If it's like a deeply researched piece, whether that's a deep dive on a company or that electric, like that's just like lunch pail work, like going in every day and being like, I'm going to do more research here. And like, I'm just, all right, like hopefully I get a paragraph out of it today. Like you can't write that in, you know, when people are like there to read like the actual research, like that takes more time. And so that was only last minute panic, because I was just like trying to like cut and make it better. And I was like, I just have to pick a day and like send this thing, because I've just been doing this for too long. So I've gotten a little bit better at that. But if it's like more of a thought piecey thing, then I've also gotten a lot better at, if I don't have anything like worth saying, better and worse actually. Because I do think like, so I've gotten a lot better at being like, I don't have anything good to send this week. I'm just going to wait until next week and work on the thing that I'm working on next. Which is good. But I think it's also like some pieces that are good come from being like, well, I don't know, I'm just gonna like start writing something and see what happens. Or like this piece that I started, I don't like it very much right now, and like now I'd probably throw that piece out. Whereas like 2 years ago when I had to send every Monday, I'd be like, all right, well, I'm just gonna like hunker down and figure out how to make this thing good. And like sometimes I would. I don't know. There's pluses and minuses to both of those, I think.
Do you think procrastinators perform better under pressure?
Probably.
But some of it is engineered and you're used to dealing with it all the time. So
I think I'm decent under pressure. Like I had to get a draft of this piece out last night. And I was just like, you know, up till 11 and writing, and after putting the kids to bed and running around with them all day, and I was like pretty tired. And then I just like went, and that's not like pressure. But it's,
you have to draw energy from like a black hole.
I was like dead. You have to draw energy from a black hole. And just like didn't eat dinner, because I knew that if I did, I'd be like done. And then just like wrote for 4 hours. And
is it like Red Bulls, Diet Cokes? Like what is it?
No, because I can't drink.
Green teas?
Way too old to drink caffeine that close to bed. So it's just like water and and going.
Oh my God.
But there is like an adrenaline that comes with it too. And so I do think like there's probably something to that relationship between like being able to work well on adrenaline and doing fine under pressure.
5 years in now, what have you, and you've had kids in between, right? So how's your creative process now evolved? You've spoken about this, but in the last year specifically, as your kids have grown up, like grown older, like how's it changed now? I know you got an office for.
I have an office,
so that is part of it,
which is huge. My creative process the first couple of years was very much like I'm writing once or twice a week, which means I'm going to work 7 days a week, and I'm just going to do like more research in those 7 days than like anybody else. And like I will just like outwork people writing this stuff. And like that just can't be the case now. And so like luckily there is a like you just compound some like knowledge. And so like I just like know things more now. And so I don't have to like fully freshly go back to the drawing board. And like in the beginning, a lot of it was like, this seems interesting. Let me learn about like fully blank sheet of paper, like how any of this works or how businesses work or like anything. And so now I have some of that I can draw from and then like go research more of the specifics. Some of them I'll just give myself more time. Like I keep referencing the electric piece because it took like a month of my life. But like that one, I was like, I realized that like I'm not going to write the piece that I thought it was going to take a week, and I'm not going to actually be able to do anything even close to good in a week here. And so like if I want to do it, I'm not going to be able to work 100 hours a week because I have children who I want to spend time with. And so I'll just like stretch that process out and do that research over a longer period of time. So that can happen as well. But I do think like writing that one, I do think a lot, like it was a good reminder that the process still for me should be like do just like a shitload, like just more research than anybody's willing to do. Because I think like there's this interesting sweet spot, but like there's a ton of experts who like will know more about any of the things that I wrote about than I will, even though I think I got like some stories that maybe they didn't know or some like documents from people on the internet. But if you're an expert, like it's hard to come to it with fresh eyes. And so I think to like almost stuff an expert level of knowledge like in your head in a short period of time, not that I'll remember it forever, but like to stuff that much in there and learn it in real time and put it down is just like a different perspective than you'd be able to get most other places. And so I like doing that and I want to do more of that.
Earlier when we started our conversation, you mentioned that writing has shaped how you think about the world. In what way?
It depends on the piece. I mean, like I do think like from the beginning of writing about something to the end, it like at the very least does what like Paul Graham and like everybody says that it does, which is like takes these jumbled thoughts that you like think you know about and like actually forces them to put them in a form where you can prove that you know it and it can like stand up to external scrutiny and so it helps like organize your thoughts and like help you realize I think what you think about a particular topic. I think it certainly makes you a more active reader. Like even now, if I'm reading a book for a piece that I'm working on versus just like reading a book, even if they're both nonfiction, they're just like two completely different reading experiences. So it's like a different way of seeing the world because you're like kind of just looking for clues to use and stuff.
Oh yeah, that's true. Because everything has to like, feed that source. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, that's interesting.
And I think like I wrote a piece on this a few months ago, but there's like a little hack here is just like having questions that you think are like, even if you're not writing, just like having big questions that you want to answer or small questions that you want to answer can like change the way that you are just like that you go about the world and look for different things. And so I think that's like a fun way to live, and an essay is a shortcut into doing that. I think there's also just like, I think one of the reasons that my essays have gotten probably like on average definitely longer is I just like don't think they're like for most things clean answers, and like short writing annoys me when it is like this is the way that things are like and it's not true. So I'm like, I don't know, here's like a shitload of evidence or like here's a shitload of information that I found, and it's like put together in a way that I think is at least compelling to read, but like I want you to come to your own conclusions here as much as me, and I'll like have conclusions. I'm not just going to be like, it's not like a bunch of bullet points and like you figure it out. But I do think just like everything is messier, and like the pieces that I've written in the past where I've been like, this is like going to do X, Y, and Z in the future, other than Ramp, which is just like stayed like right on path. Like even the ones that succeed, like do a bunch of different things. And so like, it's probably made me like less confident, but in a good way on a lot of this stuff, just like understanding that like weird things are going to happen.
And even if you have like an intuition about those things in the moment, you're trying to simplify the piece and you end up oversimplifying by keeping it short. And, maybe you want to talk about scenarios A, B, C and
anything
go
that
deeper,
anything that you do that, and this is another reason I've like stopped caring as much about growth, like anything that you do for the type of writing that I do, where you're writing about companies that you need to do to like get more people to read, like definitely, actually this is Cope also actually, as I'm saying it, but like definitely like it's like, this isn't just going to be like the biggest company in the world. It's going to be the most important company in the history of the world and like save all of your like, so like the grandiose shit that can like help hook people. Like if you ask ChatGPT for feedback, it'll be like, you should like do this like really grandiose thing. And like all of its suggestions are actually like pretty terrible. And it makes it worse. And so like, if anything, I go like the opposite way, where, you know, like it's not like I'm like, you'll read the rant piece and it's not like it's like super qualified and I'm like, I don't know if they're going to make it. Like they're definitely going to make it. And like it's an incredible company, but a lot of it is just like trying to show more and not just be like, you know, here's 1,000 words.
Do a more intellectually honest analysis.
Yeah.
Right.
And more interesting, I think. Like I was reading that book, More Money Than God, by Sebastian Mallaby on the way over here about like kind of all the early hedge funds. And I was reading the story and I'm in the middle of it now that I've heard kind of like in clips before about Soros and Druckenmiller, you know, breaking the Bank of England. And like, it's really cool when you hear that like these two guys and Scott Bessent was involved actually also. So when you hear that these like three guys who you still know about, like broke the Bank of England and, you know, crushed the pound and all, like hearing that is just cool. Reading the details and like what got them there and just like, you know, the moment by moment, like I would not want to read a 500-word version of that story. Like, give me the 15,000-word version of that story because it's just really interesting.
A lot more went on there.
Yeah, so there's a lot more of that stuff as well.
There's probably a Netflix show on that as well, I think.
There must be.
Yeah, that was a super fascinating story.
There's also I started watching it earlier this morning because it came up in the book, but I'm not going to watch a documentary in the middle of the day, but sometimes I will. It's part of the job. But on Paul Tudor Jones in like 1987, they did a documentary on him. Oh, wow. And it's like really grainy and like budget, but awesome. It's just like him just being a wild man in the markets and going behind the scenes on him. So like there's just a bunch of cool stuff that adds richness to the way that you like these stories that you like kind of know.
How do you mentioned you stopped caring about growth. How do you process critique? And how did you process it in the early days?
Depending on my mood, probably, frankly. Right. I tried to be like as anybody would, like try to like take the good stuff and like take the actual good critique and you know, ignore the bad. Like there were definitely times when I was like, damn, like this sucks being like, you know, ripped on the internet. And I think it probably actually for a while made me like pull back a little bit on you know, how much I was like, how aggressive I was willing to get in a piece and like, not in a good way, not like I'm just talking about, but just kind of like, just made me like write a little more defensively, which I don't like. Now I like don't care.
You've gotten out of it. Okay.
Right. Like I'm doing the best, like I'm doing like something, I'm not going to publish something that I don't think is like the best that I can do on it.
Right.
And like, if people aren't critiquing it, it means I haven't like tried hard enough.
Right.
And if they are, like,
critique is great.
Critique's great.
It's engagement.
Yeah. Well, it's not even that. It's not like, you know, because I've had like this experience happens a bunch where like, you know, for example, on Twitter, I like made a joke about like being able to summarize, like read a bunch of books by summarizing them with ChatGPT, and I used Anna Karenina as an example, and it went like unbelievably viral.
Yeah.
And like one that's just like annoying because you're like, do you idiots like not understand? Like, like I chose Anna Karenina. Like it's like clearly not a book that you could summarize with ChatGPT, whatever. Right. And like seeing people be so confidently wrong is actually just like a really interesting like window into a bunch of different people, and you know your intention and you see how they interpreted it, or if they interpret it right but like just want to add on to the anger, like whatever it is. So that engagement is like not healthy or good. Like, I don't care. But the other one was the people who get most mad on Twitter are also the ones who are not willing to pay for a blue check mark. So I like got like 15 million views and made like $200 on X payout that month. So it wasn't even like worth it from that perspective.
Right.
So I don't know. Like I think like any of that stuff, like I'd love if people engaged with, like, if I had something really controversial to say and people engage with it, like awesome. But just to like say stuff to get people to engage.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I meant. Of course, I'm sure it's like annoying as hell when something unintentionally, you know,
constructive criticism I love. Like half the reason I put stuff on the internet is like so someone smarter will come in and be like, no, actually, like this works this way.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Okay, so we'll wrap up. What are some of your favorite shows you're watching or have watched?
It's a great question. I haven't watched a ton recently. My guilty pleasure background show that I actually love, and like they're really getting pretty far in it. It's The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, my alien show, where it's a bunch of scientists out on this ranch, Skinwalker Ranch.
Is this from the 90s?
No, it's now.
It's now?
Robert Bigelow, aerospace billionaire Robert Bigelow owned the ranch and let the government go onto the ranch to do a bunch of tests.
Oh, wait, I've heard of this.
Back in the 1990s.
Oh my God,
but
yeah.
it was the government doing the tests, and so like the results are not out and whatever.
Right.
And so now it's a bunch of like other scientists, including this guy, Dr. Travis Taylor, and a bunch of others. Brandon Fugel, Utah billionaire, owns the ranch now.
I see.
And like the first season was like, I don't know, let's dig a hole. Like weird stuff is going on here. Let's dig a hole, run some water through it, see where it comes out. And like they've kind of like progressed slowly but surely. The frustrating part about the show for a lot of people is like, one, they don't release the data until like it's History Channel, and so it's sensationalized and like all of this stuff, which is totally fair criticism of it. But they like, and that there's like never any like resolution.
Right.
But it's also like they're looking for aliens on a ranch and for UAPs on a ranch in Utah. And like, it'd be weird if in 6 years they're like, yeah, we cracked the case. And so like, it is actually interesting. I should go back and watch all of them. I've just watched, like season by season, but it is interesting to see them like slowly like build on the experiments to now where like that was, putting a hole in the ground. Now it's like, all right, we're going to send up 500 drones to see if it interacts with this like bubble over the ranch. And then we're going to have 2 helicopters with different, like all these different sensors going by. And we're going to triangulate that data with like the FLIR and the LiDAR data that we have. We're digging holes into the tunnel. And like, it's cool at least that the experiments are getting bigger and bigger as they get more and more confident.
Right.
And they have like bigger and bigger kind of like people involved now. And they're finding some like really interesting stuff. So either like they're making stuff up, or I'm like, why is it just because it's on the history? Like, why are more people not talking about this? Because it is, I think, actually like pretty interesting now. But it was interesting. I the other day, my son was about to go to bed, and I was watching it, and they started doing this. Like, they went to a lab to use an electron microscope at Utah State University. I was like, buddy, get down here. Like, this makes science look kind of cool. Like,
look at this. Yeah.
This ceramic material, like apparently, according to these guys, when they put it under the electron microscope, holes form in it, and then when they take the electron microscope off of it, it self-heals. Like, that's pretty cool, bud. And he was like, oh, that is cool. And they like dropped it in liquid nitrogen. And so like, I actually think it'd be an interesting way to get kids, maybe like skip the first couple of seasons, interested in science, and they like keep coming up with hypotheses and testing and like moving.
Oh, interesting.
But that's like also a guilty pleasure because it's a History Channel alien show, but
makes sense. What about any good books recently that you've read?
So I told you about Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned.
Which you critiqued.
which I critiqued. Which a great idea. That, like, it, like legitimately could have been probably a blog post or a tweet.
Right. Which is most nonfiction books.
Which is most nonfiction books. But like I'm actually not, for like how much I write, I'm like actually not a very tough critic. And this one I just like couldn't, because a lot of the premise was based on this like algorithm they made where people could like, and I think I have to put myself a decade in the past before AI got good, but it was essentially like it would generate images based on what like you start with blob and then like click on the one that you like the most, and then it just like evolves, and it would evolve into these things that like no one could foresee. And so they based like this whole argument about objectives being useless and whatever on PickBreeder, this program.
Right.
And I get it because it's like where the genesis of the idea came from for them, but like also it just seemed like very silly. And a lot of the examples that it'd be like evolution, the creation of rock and roll, PickBreeder, blah, blah, like all these big things in this, like this program. And so it just like kind of weakened the argument for me. I just read Love in the Time of Cholera. I was in Colombia a couple weeks ago. And it was awesome. Like I knew I've read Marquez before. I've not read Love in the Time of Cholera. And I just like really enjoyed reading that. So that would be high on the list of recommendations right now.
You've done a ton of analysis. You've invested in quite a few companies on the frontiers. How do you think breakthrough innovation actually happens?
Ooh. Actually, so I read this great book, Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned, recently, and it's how does breakthrough innovation happen? This is not going to be the full answer, but I think that there is often,
You go file IP.
What's that?
You go file IP.
Yeah, you go file IP. There's different answers in different, because I can like counteract myself on all of these. But like we'll go back to the Astro example is like a really interesting one where like Ian flies, has been obsessed with planes, like whatever, is also a really good engineer, was making his own like motorcycles and whatever before this, and just has been like, I think the right combination of like obsessed with a thing and removed from it enough, but also like keeping an eye on like when the technology would get good enough that he could just do this thing that he really wanted to do. Right. So I think that's a really I don't think that's like a general case, but I think that's like a really interesting case where it's just like you get the right combination of a guy who's obsessed with something and really wants to do it, but like isn't pot committed to one approach. I think like that ends up actually, it's another actually why greatness cannot be planned, probably point in that book's favor. But like JC at Fuse, I think is a really interesting example of this, where like there's a bunch of companies pursuing fusion, and like you'll see that an awful lot of them are pursuing the fusion, the generator design that like the CEO pursued in their PhD work in college. And I think like this happens often. Actually, this is maybe how innovation like doesn't happen, where like you get really married and pot committed to one way that like this thing needs to happen and get stuck on that. And it might not be the best. It certainly might not be the most commercial. Whereas like JC can come in from the outside, be really interested in like how you travel among the stars, realize that you can't do that with rocket fuel and you probably need to get fusion drives. And then was like, all right, cool. Like what is like, I have never studied this. I didn't even go to college. Like, what is the type of fusion reactor that's or generator that seems to make the most sense? And like, and then like goes there and goes deep on that. So I think that's like one interesting way that it happens, but I think there's a lot of ways. I mean, like the CRISPR story is, you know, like it just like, it is really like all these weird things and curiosity kind of coming together.
Well, we'll wrap with that. And I hope like with this conversation, you know, somebody starts their next blog and doesn't quit if they're only at 400 subscribers 2 years in, or a new podcast, and people keep experimenting. People keep being not boring. And, you know, maybe somebody's is building the next jet engine, or somebody's building the next asteroid mining company. And if you are, hit both of us up. Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, Packy, great having you on.
Thanks for having me.